Okay. So, well, good evening, morning, or night, depending where you're connecting from. Firstly, thank you all for joining us in this evening. We'll be listening to Alexei Zheglov on the 5th anniversary of Fit for Purpose. So, quick reminder that at the end of the session, we'll have a space to answer all your questions, which you can ask anytime from the Q&A section, which is right next of your participants button in your screen. You can ask anytime during the lecture, and please enjoy it. Alexei, whenever you want, you can start.
All right. Thank you. So indeed, we'll be getting underway in a minute. As I'm about to share my screen. So let's start from the beginning and share my slideshow. So can you see the title slide now?
Yeah.
Yes.
We can see.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's begin. Thank you very much for inviting me here today, and thanks to everyone joining us for this hour on the 5th anniversary of Fit for Purpose. So this book is about to be published again with several important updates. So we'll have a 5th anniversary edition. Yes, it's been 5 years, and I wanted to reflect on these 5 years and talk about a number of things that perhaps happened during these 5 years and that aren't necessarily in the book yet. And maybe also take some questions. And I also have a number of questions that people sometimes ask me about Fit for Purpose. So in the 5 years of actually practicing it, several frequently asked questions came up, and maybe we'll deal with some of them in the next hour or so. So a few words about me. I suppose most people who joined this webinar already know me as one of the co-authors of the book Fit for Purpose. So I'll just say a number of basic things. I live in Toronto, Canada. I've been in the Kanban community for a long time, so I just don't want to list all the credentials, such as being a accredited trainer, consultant, etc. I work very closely with three Canadians, my co-founders and partners at the firm Squirrel North. We do consulting, coaching, and training to improve modern companies that do some kind of intellectual work and produce some complex products or professional services to its customers. Here's some information on how you can reach me if you have some questions and want to follow up. So, one of the frequently asked questions that first came up in the last 5 years, and actually we spent much of the last 5 years looking for a good answer to this question. What is a good F4P box score? So, I mean, if let's say we got 85/10/5, is this good enough? Is it bad? Could it be better? Should we strive for, I don't know, 100/0/0? Or something like that. It's interesting. Well, first we learned that the answer to this question isn't clear cut. So there isn't like a universal threshold that you say, well, if you got, let's say, 85 in the first component, then you're good. Then we started looking for a better answer on how to explain it, and so I'm going to actually present it today. However, for the benefit of some people who may be asking, like, what's even an F4P box score, right? This has been advertised as a beginner webinar on Fit for Purpose. I will talk a little bit about like what this F4P box score is, where do we get these box scores, how do we usually read them, and so on. This will actually help me answer the question what a good F4P box score is. So where do we get them? Well, we get them from these things called F4P cards. So here's a snapshot of kind of an old school F4P card from 2016. These days, F4P cards are mostly electronic. We make them using tools like Google Forms. I'm just using this retro F4P card because it shows the layout of data and like different questions we're asking, different input fields in a very simple form that really fits on a small piece of paper. I should acknowledge Rodrigo Yoshima from Brazil at this moment. He actually just posted on LinkedIn this week announcing this, helping announce this webinar and inviting his followers to join it. Rodrigo was very much part of the evolution and the experimentation in F4P cards about 6-7 years ago. He mentioned how such F4P cards, some of the very first F4P cards, appeared in his business based in Brazil. And by, I would say 2015, 2016, we actually learned a lot by experimenting with these F4P cards, and we kind of came up with this design of an F4P card. But we didn't just design it, it was a process of evolutionary improvement that took several unexpected turns. And the starting point around early 2010s was a very well-known Net Promoter Score. So using this 11-point numeric scale, would you recommend your product, our product or service to your friends and colleagues? And something that happened in the evolution of the NPS very quickly, you know, if you gave us a particular rating between 0 and 10, why don't you tell us why you assign that particular rating? This extra question wasn't in the original NPS about a decade or two ago, but it is very common in NPS surveys nowadays. So if you get, let's say, an NPS survey in your email inbox as a consumer, vendors often ask you to answer this question. However, this certainly wasn't the last step because some customers told us, you know, my satisfaction and the fitness of your product for customers like me has actually nothing to do with my recommending it to, let's say, my neighbor. And so at this point, we actually pivoted to better understanding customer purposes. So we started asking, like, what was your actual purpose in buying this product or service? And then how would you assess the fitness of our product or service for that purpose, using pretty much the same NPS scale and the same follow-up question. So that was an improvement, but there was still room for better improvement because we saw some noise in the data, because people don't exactly calibrate a 10-point scale very well, or they calibrate it in very different ways. So that resulted in some noise in the data and difficulty interpreting them. So at this point, we actually began calibrating the scale and actually replacing just a pure numeric scale with more factual taxonomies. So this is a really important step. Even though you may see numbers 1 through 5 on the left, we're not asking the question, please give our business a rating on the scale from 1 to 5 stars so that, you know, we can boast, let's say, 4.2 later on. So we're actually trying to match customer experience to 5 simple micro narratives, where actually narrative number 4 is about fully fit for this particular purpose. Narrative 5 means over-serving, 3 is neutral, and there are some levels of dissatisfaction that are in the 2 narratives at the bottom. So, I mean, if I take numbers away from the left, we still have these 5 little stories, and we can ask a customer, which of these 5 stories is the closest match for your actual experience. So, so this calibration actually matters. So once we actually put up these 5 stories, it's really not a valid thing to do to, let's say, take the average of the 5 numerical ratings, because we're not actually asking for a numerical rating. When people give us a neutral rating, the product matched most of my expectations, but with some reservations. We can often find clues in their written responses to the next question as to what those reservations were. And those typically tell us something about, let's say, some new fitness criteria, something customers perhaps expected but didn't quite get. So there is usually a very good amount of information and as far as improvement ideas. Folks, I should point out that you may have seen variations of this survey using, let's say, not 5, but 6 fitness narratives. So particularly Rodrigo Yoshima experimented with such F4P cards using 6 levels. You can add another level here, let's say, to represent some additional level of over or under serving. You have to be very clear, however, where is the neutral level in this picture, and where is the zone of positive responses, which responses represent over-serving, and where's the zone of negative under-serving responses. So subtracting negatives from positives, dividing by the total number of responses gives us kind of a net score. It's pretty much the same math as NPS, but well, we're actually assessing a different thing, so it's a net fitness score of sorts. However, this mimicking of NPS didn't last very long, because this aggregate fitness score doesn't really work out. And here's a simple counter example where we have 2 completely different business situations represented with the same net fitness score. After all, we why is this not fit for purpose? Well, it isn't fit for our purpose because we actually wanted something better than just get a numeric score. We just wanted to get a numeric score. We just ask for the number of stars out of 5 or the net promoter score. And now let's say we get an NPS of 0.7 or we get 4.2 stars out of 5, and we can just boast it, and then what's next? We wanted some actionable feedback so that we could take some pragmatic action to improve our service or make it better suited to evolving customer needs. And simply having a number wasn't good enough. So fortunately, the F4P box score appeared very shortly and really solved this problem. So we simply list the score as a triple. First, the percentage of positive responses on all purposes, then neutrals, and then negatives. And we always use a triple, and we don't aggregate the 3 numbers. So not aggregating them is key. It's always a triple and never a single number. So that's really how the modern F4P card design came together. It remained pretty stable and robust, I would say, since 2016 or so. This is already reflected in the first 2 editions of the book Fit for Purpose. So you ask basically what the customer's purpose was. ask them to assess fitness for that particular purpose. If customers have more than one purpose, that happens sometimes, you can give them space to provide perhaps two purposes that they had in mind when buying your product or service. They can give different ratings because your same product or service may have different fitness for two different purposes, even in the eyes of the same customer. And the third question, the narrative, helps customers kind of explain their answers to the first two questions and perhaps reveal some gaps in fitness, communicate some expectations that are hidden to us as owners of this business. Sometimes F4P box score can have some segmentation included. So this is the detailed F4P box score with some segmentation by purpose. So that can, this is basically more granular analysis that can give us some additional insights into fitness and our strategy from this point onwards. I really want to get to the point, to the original question, what is a good F4P box score? So I'm mindful that I'm not teaching a class on F4P today. So I will just briefly mention, this is one of the key elements of F4P framework, how we interpret survey results and translate them into some pragmatic action. And I just want to highlight a couple of possibilities here. Seeking improvements. So when our service isn't quite the best it can be, but we are trying to serve our target audience, right? So we're going to get a number of neutral responses, and we're going to find a lot of good ideas from responders who gave us this rating. Sometimes we're also in the situation when some people, we got some wrong customers for our product, and they're clearly unsatisfied because our product is designed for some other purpose than these customers had in mind. This happens sometimes, and if this is really not our target audience, we should reposition our product such that they don't really spoil our product or service delivery, and they don't damage our core customer group. So how does this all help us answer the question, what is a good F4P box score? And I just put some actual examples of box scores from that occurred in the last 6 years of practice on the screen. And here's an interesting hint. All these scores may be good. And it's just, this highlights how difficult the interpretation, you cannot really make one rule that fits all businesses. Everyone is in different situations. So what's going on here? Folks, I'll start with kind of the negative side of the picture. So if we are actually good at something, right? And we should be in the business of building, creating, and delivering something we're actually good at. We should not see a lot of negative ratings. So let's say if I try to entertain you by dancing, well, I probably hear from you pretty soon that I'm actually quite bad at it, right? Or, yeah. So I probably get a pretty good number of negative responses. So, but I'm in the wrong business. I shouldn't. This is not my way of making a living, right? So I'm not a dancer, right? So, but if we're in the right business, then and our product or service isn't like a big miss, right? So we kind of know what we need to do here. Then we should, the proof of that should be a relatively small number of negative responses, right? So I would say, as a rule of thumb, less than 10%. Now, some number of negative responses can happen for for two reasons. So sometimes our product actually does have some kind of problem, and it isn't really working for some of our customers. The customers are telling us that. So that's a valid reason. Although if our product or service is mature enough, we have delivered it enough many times, right? So there's enough history for that product. We should have gradually reduced the number of such negative instances to a pretty low percentage, right? At some point in our product evolution. Sometimes this happens because we indeed got wrong customers. So people bought our product by mistake. They should have bought something else. And sometimes they made a mistake, but actually, and this is like one of the messages in the book Fit for Purpose, this mistake is on us, business owners. We should have positioned our product or service differently, better, so that we do get the right customers and we don't accidentally sell it to wrong customers. Right? So sometimes mistakes in positioning our products may happen, but if we've been doing this for a while, if we are in the right kind of business, we should have figured this out. This should be indicated in a very low percentage of negatives. So negatives should definitely be a pretty low number. What about the neutrals? So this is where it gets tricky. So we should definitely get more positive responses, right? However, and we have really seen this unfold over the last several years, and we have some like long-running stories how the business is pretty successful. There is a lot of repeat customers. They keep buying this stuff, but the neutral rating is pretty consistently north of 20%. How does this happen? Remember, the neutral responses are often a good source of advice on improvement, right? So something wasn't quite right. Customers generally satisfied, some reservations. Good source of improvement suggestions. Well, the time doesn't stop. Customers' needs and requirements and satisfaction criteria continue to evolve. Our product or service should evolve too, right? So it's a co-evolution of our product or service and its customers' needs and expectations. So as this happens from time to time, there will be a gap, right? So customers' needs and expectations have evolved. Our product hasn't caught up to that quite yet. And so there's a gap, and we see it in a good number of neutral responses, along with some ideas on how to improve. Then we catch up, but by the time we figured it out, customers' needs and expectations evolved again, and again there's some gap, along with some good ideas for improvement. So if this evolution happens relatively quickly, we may have a pretty consistent number of neutral responses, and it may be worryingly high to some business owners. However, we have really seen examples where neutrals stay above 20%, yet customers keep coming back and buying the evolving product, right? Sometimes this also happens as we go through several different waves in our product or service adoption lifecycle. And the version of the product that sort of satisfied the early adopter waves is missing something that the second and the third wave of adopters require. So we get some neutral rating from them, and then we eventually catch up. So this may be happening. Now, by subtraction, the number of positive responses for, let's say, a pretty good product or service can actually vary in a significant range. So I would say it should always be over 60% for sure. I mean, this is a pretty low threshold, right? So those of you who have actually practiced FRP framework and who are very good at the business you run usually have seen the positive component of the FRP box score well in excess of 60, be closer to 100% than 60%. But nevertheless, if we were to like state a universal rule, I would say if it gets below 60%, then something is off, right? So it just means there has to be a lot of neutrals, a lot of negatives, and just something wasn't quite right. At the same time, once we get above 80%, then if you set an arbitrary goal to drive it, let's say from 80% to 100%, you may be chasing a vanity metric. Because aside from 80% positive, there has to be some room left for neutrals who may be a rich source of improvement ideas. It's an indicator that the product or service is evolving, and there could be some occasional negatives as well. So I would say a very different kind of dimension of looking at the box score is over time. And the thing is, and again, we need a good amount of time, like maybe several years to actually see it. And that actually took a few years since the publication of the book in 2017. But pretty much every business will have a bad day from time to time. And we may get an FRP box score on that day that is just terrible. And the question is now, can we recover quickly? Can we regain fitness and make sure that this is just a very short episode? So can we go from, let's say, a poor FRP score to a pretty good one quickly, preferably in the very next product or service delivery cycle? So if our business is robust, resilient, if we're really good at what we do, right, then an occasional poor FRP box score doesn't really represent us. It just basically says we had a really bad day. What FRP box score does tell about us is how quickly we recovered from that bad day and how quickly we regained our customers' confidence, as well as which would be reflected in much better FRP box scores. So, folks, this is basically what I wanted to say about FRP box scores. It is a nuanced answer, but at the same time, it is an accurate answer, and yes, you can have some rules of thumb. So generally, don't worry about neutrals if, let's say, they begin to exceed, let's say, 10%, for as long as they don't go over maybe 25 to 30. So neutrals may be okay. They're helping actually guide the evolution of the product, right? So watch them. Do improve your product and service based on the suggestions, but don't worry if customers, if you get this kind of rating, worry if customers don't bring you repeat business. So that would be a real problem. And negatives may happen occasionally, and basically the positives 60 to 80 is probably the healthy baseline. Above 80, you may be deriving a vanity metric. And remember, the speed of recovery from a bad day matters a lot too, right? So, so a fit-for-purpose company will recover very quickly. It's not just about the numbers in the FRP box score. All right, I want to switch to a different topic. We finally know why you fly. It's one of the chapters in the book was about customer intimacy, or sometimes lack of it. Airline industry providing plenty of examples. We know why you fly used to be American Airlines advertising slogan. there was a lot of indicators that airlines don't really know why we fly. Lots of examples of like unsatisfactory fitness documented in the Fit for Purpose book. So because airline industry is a pretty good supplier of counter examples of like how not to satisfy customers and how to basically make them leave for a competitor. So I'm basically giving this tagline, we finally know why you fly. 4 or 5 years later, we finally do, the airlines. With the tongue in cheek, because here's why. Because you, dear passengers, are basically walking data warehouses. There's lots of data on you, and we want to collect it, we want to analyze it, package it, and sell it. This is why you fly, so that you can give it all to us. And there are several worrying trends here that airlines are increasingly not even in the business of transportation. And if you have seen income statements from several major North American airlines lately in their balance sheets, you will basically say they're not in a transportation business at all. So transportation is basically just some kind of hook, a form of advertising, a loss leader, whatever. The main business is loyalty. And their real customers are credit cards, brands, sponsored loyalty programs, various point schemes, people who basically need your data so that they can sell you more stuff. And the airline is basically just a way to get the data and package it and sell it. So you are no longer the customer. If you go to an airport these days, you are the product, and the operations are increasingly orienting towards actually serving the real customers and not you. So this trend is likely to continue for some time. Passengers may be satisfied even less than before. And this is by design. This matches your 2022 post-pandemic travel experience. I mean, this is why. So this is a worrying trend. And, you know, as much as when we wrote the book Fit for Purpose, and when David Anderson and I spoke at several conferences, we used like quite a few transportation industry examples to show like where the gaps in customer satisfaction arise, how both the transportation companies could provide better service, but at the same time, how your non-transportation business, your technology business perhaps, can learn a lot from those examples, right? And now suddenly, like, transportation industry isn't such a great source of examples on Fit for Purpose, because we just have to question whether they're even in transportation business, even though they have moving metal boxes, you know, doesn't mean they're really in the transportation business anymore. So that's another interesting insight and trend that emerged in recent years that I think is worthy of reflection on the 5th anniversary of Fit for Purpose. Folks, I cannot avoid some really major world events of the last 5 years. And this message about time as a fitness criterion has always been one of the core messages of Fit for Purpose framework. Customers don't want just your product or service. They have some purpose to it, but the purpose isn't eternal. There's some limited time frame for it, right? And that purpose does expire. And if you haven't delivered your product or service by that time, you can no longer satisfy it. So time certainly matters. Customers do care for duration, predictability, or timeliness of your product or service delivery. And something that happened in the last 5 years, a certain virus actually helped us experience this, sometimes at a very personal level. So time really matters. Let's consider some examples. Taking a COVID test. You can take it, let's say, so there's a cheap self-administered solution, takes about 15 minutes at home. It's less than 100% accurate, but it's generally good for managing personal and family health risks. So actually, like, unfortunately, it wasn't available widely early in the pandemic. In, let's say, the Omicron wave, late 2021, early 2022, there was a lot greater availability of these tests. People, families were just buying them for home use. They were quite popular. It doesn't provide you 100% accurate answer, but basically have the whole family take the test at home, helps you manage your personal risks. It is fit for that purpose. And it only takes 15 minutes. What if you have not this cheap test, but let's say a more expensive piece of equipment and let's say a couple of hours? Then you can provide an almost 100% accurate molecular test, such as a PCR test. This is actually how long it takes to run them and get the result. So any purpose that needs higher accuracy molecular test, the excellence threshold for delivering it would be about 2 hours. Maybe a little bit less if you've got really expensive equipment. But generally there are some physical limits into like how many cycles you have to run, how many seconds each cycle takes. And therefore there's some physical constraints on how fast this test can run, but generally 2 to 3 hours is a standard of excellence in this particular service delivery. If you can do this test really quickly, then particularly very early in the pandemic, this is very good for public health purposes such as contact tracing, so that the contact tracers can stay ahead of the spreading virus. And if someone's got infected, they can identify their contacts, test them, see who else is infected, and just basically trace the entire network of contacts to minimize the spread of the virus. So if this is done quickly, the spread of the pandemic can be fought. However, as those of us who had to take like COVID tests during the pandemic, I took it about 10 times. Usually the result is there with like maybe 24 hours away, and not always. And at the 24-hour threshold, the test ceases to be useful for, let's say, aggressive contact tracing purposes, and it becomes more of a lagging indicator. It may become useful for certain, let's say, travel restriction measures that were adopted by many countries. So basically, if you have to fly somewhere, you have to show a test that is before a certain expiration time, and let's say 72 hours, and you need, let's say, a provider that can deliver this test, let's say with an ironclad 24-hour SLA, otherwise it's just not fit for your travel purpose. So weaker purposes can be satisfied with basically less than stellar standard of service delivery, such as 24 hours or a little bit more. However, actually the longest test taken in my family during the pandemic took 5 days to deliver. And at this point, I would say it's not useful for anything other than compliance with the policy that the test be taken. So basically, this is a connection between time, between non-functional quality criteria such as accuracy, and whatever purpose you are pursuing. Basically, it connects pretty strictly to the timeline. And if a service doesn't satisfy this timeline, it's just basically not good for that purpose. That purpose is defeated. And that may have quite significant consequences. Folks, I realize we are, like, this is all taking time. I have lots of reflections on fit for purpose over the last 5 years. However, I need to kind of pick and choose some topics. So I hopefully answered some frequently asked questions that have been asked in the last 5 years. I didn't miss reflections on some key events. However, I just want to finish with this, and this is for kind of a more advanced members of the audience that could be on this call, just in case. I just wanted to send a message with this diagram that it doesn't stop here, and we're continuing to understand how different fitness criteria trade off against each other, particularly the role that time plays in such trade-offs and decisions. We're continuing to better understand how to satisfy customers and manage the risks involved. So in this diagram, and this is basically a draft sketch of it. So I attempted to bring together the element of time, how long it takes to deliver some product or service, various scenarios that can arise, and how that connects to some customer expectations on quality. So, and how can we manage the process or improve the process to find the right trade-off of those, and basically hit them as much as possible, right? Hit all the thresholds. So one of the trends I'm definitely seeing in the recent years is the time distribution histograms, and this is basically a bar chart of time and process. We start seeing customer fitness thresholds, like time from, let's say, 0 to infinity on this scale. Like, where is the customer fitness threshold, and how many customers have been on the happy side versus the unhappy side of this threshold, right? So that's that orange bar in the middle of the diagram. We also see some optimistic, typical pessimistic scenarios. The range of pessimistic scenarios are usually inherently quite unpredictable. There's significant statistical error in them. That's why that range of pessimistic scenarios is quite wide. We see how these scenarios sometimes occur by luck, sometimes by choice, sometimes because we have taken certain delivery risks. And sometimes on the flip side of those risks are customer fitness criteria with respect to non-functional quality, some illities that are very hard to get, and they require a much more complex delivery process, but that complex process has a lot of delay risks in it, which occasionally materialize and show up in the tail of this distribution as pessimistic scenarios when it comes to time delivery. So anyway, if you are among the group of one of the more, let's say, advanced users of, let's say, FRP framework or maybe the Kanban method, let's have some conversation around this diagram. I'm just posting it here kind of as an invitation to this ongoing discourse. I think I should stop at this moment. I'm mindful of time. There are probably some good Q&A queued up. So let's check the Q&A and the chat.
Yeah, so we have we have some questions here. So the first one that was posted is, what is the difference between the FRP and Kano model?
Can you please repeat the question?
Yeah. It is, what is the difference between the fit for purpose and the KANO model? KANO model.
Folks, we believe in short, F4P framework is a lot more comprehensive, and it actually is about a whole bunch of other fitness criteria that matter to customers. It also contains like the whole methodology on, let's say, how to assess fitness and current fitness and translate it into, let's say, some strategic moves. It has guidance on different kinds of metrics, which, if you use them for the right purpose, drive very good behavior that is aligned with customer satisfaction. If you use them for wrong purpose, can drive dysfunction in the organization and promote behavior that actually go against customer satisfaction. There is a lot of guidance on commonly occurring fitness criteria that are, let's say, go significantly beyond, let's say, product feature selection that KANO analysis is about. And another important distinction of F4P framework from actually a lot of alternative methodologies is understanding customer purpose and market segmentation by customer purpose.
Okay, so the second question is, what are the major changes to the next edition of the book?
So in the next edition of the book, there will be a substantial chapter on OKRs, which actually stood out as one of the key integrations of fit for purpose framework. So in short, with F4P framework, you get better, more actionable OKR, and you sidestep a whole bunch of dysfunctions that real world companies have with the OKR framework, kind of the low maturity OKR implementation. So F4P will help you do it better. Actually, it's been our experience, by our, I mean, David Anderson, myself, and also several Brazilian practitioners of F4P, particularly Andressa Chiara and Marco Dubowski, is that when you basically come up to executives and basically start explaining something on OKRs, and it doesn't go well, and then you tell them about F4P frameworks, their reaction is, why didn't you start with the F4P framework? Right. So OKRs is a big part of the delta in the new edition. Another important delta is deeper exploration of commonly occurring fitness criteria. So I think we have like more detailed and accurate breakdown of fitness criteria aside from quality and time. So such as ability to customize, affordability, and so on.
Okay, so next question is actually a two-part question. It's two questions in one. So the first one is, how frequently should we consolidate the data for the F4P box in order to see if we had a bad day?
So, it's basically, if you have some timeline of F4P box scores, then you will notice when you had a bad day. So you have a string of, it really depends on the cycle of your business. And so because for some businesses, it may be a day or a week or a month. I would say if you have some, or sometimes your business is driven by events, right? So I would say it may be like a week or a month. So if you have a regular collection process for your F4P box scores, and you are already plotting them over time, let's say this month, next month, another month, or maybe you do it by week already, you will notice, let's say, a sudden drop, right? So that's when you have a bad day. Can you recover, let's say, the very next bar on that chart? Can it show an improved FRP box score?
Okay, so the next question is, well, it's part of the previous question, is like, what time frame do you consider a day or a bad day?
Yeah. So it's just the cycle of the business. So it's each business has its own natural cycle. So I don't want to be too specific. You have to find what the natural rhythm of your business is, and you know, if like, can you do better on the next beat of this rhythm, so to speak? So I'd use this analogy. All right, so let's attempt another question.
Yeah, so next question is, how often can we redo FRP searches without disturbing the clients?
So I would say this is, again, very specific to one's business. However, what we noted pretty consistently, FRP cards and forms, such as, let's say, if you implemented a Google form for FRP, they are consistently far less intrusive than all other survey methods. And they take less time to complete, less effort to complete by customers, and they consistently yield higher response rates. So we've, because we often introduce fit-for-purpose framework in real company environments where there is some existing survey method already. We do not replace that method. We rather let the two methods basically compete and see which one is fit, right? So that's a red squirrel, gray squirrel analogy. So, and then we see how some traditional methods get, let's say, maybe 20% response rate. FRP cards get like 95% response rate in one company. In one company, it takes 15 minutes to complete the survey. FRP card takes 3 minutes. So we consistently get less intrusion, greater response rates, and more actionable insights out of FRP cards. So it is rarely a problem. It is rarely a problem to basically administer an FRP survey, like the client disturbance when administering FRP survey. I see there is a question on expanding the OKR topic. So, all right, so I'll try to expand it in like relatively few words. This is a big topic, so I'll try to summarize it in a couple of minutes. So basically with OKRs, there is basically a bad way to do them. And it's a real trap. And let's say the originators of the OKR methodology who wrote books about it, they actually document all the common traps other companies fall into as they try to implement OKRs. And for example, one of them is we set some objectives for, let's say, the amount of sales in our business, how we want to achieve it. Let's say we want to increase sales by 20%, I mean, stretch goal 30%, right? And then, you know, if you are a salesperson, or let's say the vice president of sales department, given this goal, what do you do? What do you do exactly to drive sales? So actually, greater sales may somehow connect to customer satisfaction. So customers who find our product fitter for their purpose will buy more. And we may get more such customers. right? What are the indicators of fitness of our product? So now we begin to explore like who the customers really are. How do we segment them by purpose? What fitness criteria matter in each segment? Where we need to satisfy them to the highest standard of excellence, where we need to provide some basic service, where we have to provide something in between. Now we have a strategy. And now the real key result, a real objective is we need to nail those fitness criteria consistently. And if we do, the result is better sales, the result is more successful business. So basically it's like one of the possible dysfunctions is just set arbitrary goals and then people try to achieve them by all means available to them, such as all kinds of let's say marketing promotions to lure new customers while we let other customers depart, well, because our service isn't satisfactory enough, right? And so we're in this endless cycle of customer churn. Stopping it and growing the business may take just actually understanding customer fitness criteria and setting those as goals. So this is just one of the many ways F4P framework can help select good objectives and figure out what key results would be indicators of progress towards those objectives, so that we can actually grow business sustainably by satisfying customers and not just by making a number. So, so in short, F4P framework helps achieve higher maturity OKR implementations that basically align with the intent of the founders of the OKR methodology. And F4P framework helps sidesteps all the known traps in the real world applications of OKR that lead to basically, well, we made the number, but you know, our business didn't really grow. So I hope this helps answer the question, and we expand on the OKR and thus expand on the OKR topic. All right, so just want to check what else is there. Any interesting message? Messages potentially in the all right.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Alexei. It was really, really interesting. And also thanks to everybody who joined. It's been a pleasure. And just remember that you'll have this webinar uploaded to YouTube in a couple of days. So be sure to check our social media and YouTube channel.
All right. I'm still, so are we, so is this the conclusion?
Yeah, it seems there are no more questions.
Okay.
People are thanking you for your session, so it seems like, yeah.
Folks, thank you everyone for coming here, and let's do it. Let's just apply this framework, or at least some part of it, in the business you're in, and let's continue the conversation about fit for purpose. Let's continue sharing stories of various businesses and what happens there and what kind of interesting, unusual products, services, fitting customers' needs we can get. Let's improve our shared understanding of this field. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, and see you in the next time.